All right, everybody, welcome back to On the Ball, the new video series from Vanderbilt Sports and Society Initiative. Really excited to have our guest today, Kent Washington, who is an author of a book called Kentomania, a Black basketball virtuoso in communist Poland. Kent is joining us from New Rochelle, New York, and this is his story of being the first American and first African-American basketball player to play behind the Iron Curtain in communist Poland in the late 1970s and the early 80s. Kent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So before we get to your time in Poland, which is fascinating, I was hoping that you could just give us a sense of who you were before you went over there. And I'll ask you something about your college experience, but before college, tell us about where you grew up and the importance of basketball to you as a young man.
Okay, I was born and raised in New Rochelle, New York. I attended the public school systems there, and I took full advantage of the boys and the girls clubs, the YMCA, and all the recreational sports, the resources. And I became extremely interested in playing basketball around the age of 12, 13. I knew I wasn't like my friends, to where I had this obsessive wanting to practice basketball at all costs. It consumed my thoughts. It just started to consume everything in my life, and I became obsessive about my practice methods.
Yeah, I was in the book, you talk about practicing in extreme heat conditions, and the amount of running you would do. Like, why was this so important to you? Why'd you put yourself through such, I imagine, pain, as a young athlete?
It was this desire to become the best basketball player that I could be. I set goals. I wanted to make my junior high school team, my JV team, and the varsity team. And every summer I would recommit myself to a different type of a practice. And my main source was I would practice alone, full court. And that gave me conditioning, stamina, speed of the game, ball handling. I could also try things that I would not normally try during a team practice, which allowed me to use my imagination when I did practice. And I put myself through it, not knowing that I was putting myself through anything really that was arduous. It was just my way of finding like solitude, and I could practice alone without being bothered, and I was in my own world.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we think about basketball players, height being a major advantage for them. That wasn't necessarily the case for you, though, was it?
Not at all. I saw being small as an advantage, because I figured that I would have the best skill, one, and two, be in the best shape of anyone I ever faced. So size didn't really bother me. I didn't dream about playing pro or anything like that. I didn't dream about playing college. I just set goals in front of me that were hopefully attainable.
Okay, and you're 5'8", is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and then you played at New Rochelle High School, and then accept a scholarship to play D2 ball at Southampton College, right?
Yes. And, that all kind of came about. I had no idea that I would ever play any college ball. During my junior year, the summer, my father allowed me to go to Walt Frazier's basketball camp. And there, through my desire and the passion to practice, Coach Jim Colclaw from Southampton College, he kind of noticed me. The summer after, going into my senior year, I went back. Then it was the Dean Meminger camp.
Okay.
And Coach Colclaw was still there. And he told me he was going to pursue me as a basketball player. And he came to high school games, especially the Mount Vernon game where I faced my arch rival, Ray Williams, that played for the New York Knicks. Earl Tatum, that was a player there. Mount Vernon was like loaded. And those games are where you either made or broke yourself.
And, early in the book you write, and I will get to your Southampton story and the Poland story, but you said you grew up around so many great basketball players and, New York City, New Rochelle, in college, that you didn't know that your story was even worthy compared to some of these guys. Is that true?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You're so humbled by playing and knowing people like Gus Williams and Earl Tatum and Ray Williams and Lowe's Moore. And, these guys all went to top D1 schools. Many played in the pros, and I played in like Poland. So I thought I better keep my successes to myself, because I'm like a second class citizen compared to these guys.
Okay. So you started at Southampton, and this is around 1973-74 season, when the NCAA rules have been changed to allow freshmen to play on the varsity. It used to be the freshman team and a varsity team. So that was good timing on your part. And then another piece of good timing is that your college team takes a trip to Poland, and highly unusual at that point in the 1970s. How was it that this small college ends up playing in a tournament in Poland?
Yeah, the mayor and the city council were Polish, and somehow they got an offer for our college to play a 14-day 7-game tournament there. So we accepted. It was subsidized, so we only had to pay for certain things, and it turned out being unbelievable. We played in 2 cities, Warsaw and the town of Lublin, and I played magnificently. Reasons I could say the FIBA basketball rules enhanced my skill set, enhanced my instincts, and the crowd adored my imaginative style of play, which they have never seen a skill set like mine.
That's incredible. In the book, you write about this was your first flight, of your life, was across the Atlantic Ocean to Poland, and some of the amenities of American life, like the toilets or the toilet paper, was completely different. What do you remember as some of the things on this first trip to Poland before you go back there to play professionally, but on your college trip? What were some of the differences that really stand out in your mind?
Yeah, well, the plumbing and the locker rooms really stood out. We had a couple of comedians on our team that when they saw a ripped up newspaper stuck on a hook next to the toilet, the comments were, newspapers aren't just for reading, came up. And, I never drank a Coca-Cola there because the refrigeration was kind of subpar. I immediately noticed the fashion was very old. A lot of people wore plaids with polka dots and stripes, and it was just an outdated of a fashion. Transportation, we saw a lot of horse-drawn carriages on the street. The buses were quite old, and the buildings there were these monstrous buildings, but they looked old. They all looked the exact same. A lot of uniformity there, which we saw. The public, like toilets, were manned by older women. They did a tremendous. The physical labor seemed to be done by older the women there. They sweep the streets. They man the toilets. It was really kind of eye-opening that it was like we went back in time.
Wow. But in some ways, it seems like the style of basketball that they were playing in Poland wasn't like going back in time. It's almost a foreshadowing of the way that American or NBA basketball is played these days in terms of the ball movement and big guys being able to shoot, the Euro step, things like that. So you were experiencing a whole new brand of basketball.
Absolutely. When we played our first game there, we got killed, the college team. The pace of the game is so much faster. The ball movement, the bodies are constantly moving. Everybody can really shoot the ball or handle the ball. The threes, second lane was the trapezoid. Our low post players had to get used to kind of posting at a midpoint. They weren't even low post. The traveling violation was a lot different. The Euro step came in where we were trying to pick up like charges, and they were just like stepping around us, making layups. Okay. The ball can be touched after it hits the rim. So we were just losing points because they were just slapping the ball away. So, and there was a 30-second shot clock, which like we didn't have. Mm-hmm. So it was such a different game. However, now reflecting back, I was privy to the Euro step and dribble handoffs. I mean, all of these things are new here, but I was experiencing them then.
Yeah. And you made quite an impression on the Polish coaches and the professional teams that saw you play. And so your initial invitation to come play professionally in Poland came while you were still a student with eligibility left in college.
Yes, it did. I realized that I was becoming a quote unquote star there because after games, you just get like mobbed. And they've never seen no-look passes, ball handling moves like I have. So I became a point of interest for a coach, and he invited me to stay there. But of course, I couldn't. I had a year left. My parents would kill me, So I came back, but I was really like humbled by the fact that this coach thought that I was good enough to play on the European team.
All right. And so then you get back in touch after you're done with college, you come back over to play professionally. And you mentioned that your style of play was different. And so people were intrigued by that, and you were quite a popular player. But you're also kind of, in some ways, a curiosity. Most of these people had never seen black person before. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. And you know, the the novelty of me being black in the the city there was, you get stared at, you get, like because you're black and they've never seen a black person. So, but that kind of wore off after I started to play. Then I became Ken Washington, the basketball star there. But there was always this intrigue about my hair, my skin, about that part of it too. So it was both. But gyms got crowded because of the basketball part. My being black commanded attention outside in my, the neighborhood there, but people that didn't know me yet as the basketball player would often just look because like, what's this black guy? He lives on our street.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, there's certain things that were happening that had they happened in the United States would have been perceived and would have been actually racist. Some of the names that the fans were chanting while you were playing, or just wanting to touch your hair and things like that. But it seemed like you didn't perceive it as hateful there. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, one of our games in Warsaw in the book is the Kunta Kinte game. And I'm out there, we're warming up. And, basketball fans there are like soccer fans, but just indoor. And they chant the whole game. There's drums being played, there's trumpeting, there's flags being waved. It is lively. So we're practicing and it's packed. I mean, the sidelines, the baselines, people are sitting everywhere. And all of a sudden they start chanting Kunta Kinte, Kunta, Kunta Kinte. And I'm thinking, are they saying what I think they're saying? So I couldn't show any emotion because I'd be actually playing into it. But what I realized after the game was this was their way of kind of heckling me, because when the game ended, the whole audience came pouring out to get my autograph, whole touching me, kissing me, wanting me to like sign things. So I knew right then that they're not racist.
Yeah. And you wrote in the book that the Roots was actually playing on Polish TV at the time, which I was really surprised to hear that
Yeah.
would have aired there.
Yeah.
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 Did you have like, what sort of fears or apprehensions did you have? I mean, growing up during the Cold War, like I'm sure you had certain images in your mind about what a communist country would be about, or like, did you ever feel like, man, this is gonna be a dangerous situation I'm walking into, or that they're going to be spying on me, or they'll think I'm spying on them? Like, any Cold War intrigue type feelings?
Well, that's a great question. Going there, going with Southampton College helped me out so much because I could get an idea of certain things. And one thing was for absolute sure, the spectators loved basketball. So me being blinded by the passion of practicing, and led me there. The hotel room I stayed in for the first week, and then finally I moved into a home, and I was looked after by Babcia Kowalska, my grandma there. I knew what the rooms kind of looked like: furniture, plumbing, refrigerating, electricity. I knew things were substandard. So I realized before I went, I would have to do more with less. And if I wanted to play there, which I did, I would have to deal with that and not let my Americanism allow me to look down on things that I cannot control anyway. So the communist part of it, in school, you don't really learn that much about communism. You talk a little bit, but there's no real concept about its, except it's the evil that empire, kind of like a propaganda wise. But when I was there with the college, these people wanted to touch me, talk to me, kiss me. I mean, they were kind. So I had no apprehensions, no fears. And when I finally went there, they treated me just wonderfully. So, and even during Solidarity, I never had any fears there at all.
Yeah. And you mentioned your grandmother, and I thought that was one of the most touching parts of the book, just how close you became with this older woman at 80 years old that was working so hard and taking great care of you, like washing your laundry by hand, boiling it on the top of the stove, and then talk about like everything that she did and how you became so tight with her, even though you really couldn't communicate between the English and the Polish at first.
Yeah, it was amazing. I was in a hotel for about 10 days, and then they got me a room in one of our club board members' homes, and his mother kind of took care of me. She fed me. She looked after my wash. She scolded me when I did something bad, when I tried to eat warm bread, and you're not supposed, you're supposed to let it cool down. I got scolded which knife to use to cut the bread with, and to cut the kielbasa with, how to wait for the tea leaves to actually go down into the glass before you start to stir it. I mean, all of these little things that I had no idea. Babcha got me through it, and we kind of communicated without speaking. She called me Yen instead of Ken, and things like that. And there was a person that lived there also named the Anya, and Anya was very helpful too. So they made sure that I took my shoes off before I came in, and kept my room clean, and they looked after me. I mean, she was probably then, for the first 3 years there, the most important person in my life.
Amazing. You mentioned a trip you made to a concentration camp while you were there also, that seemed to have a really profound impact on you, and led you to think about some of the similarities in the between even concentration camp, between the Holocaust and slavery in the United States. Talk about that visit and what it meant to you.
Yeah, our college went to it was called Majdanek, and it's outside of Lublin, and it housed 250,000 like prisoners there, and we got to go in, and the translators, they translated everything there. There's a lot of things to read, and there's black and white film that they showed, and it was absolutely horrible. And what really got to me was there were these barricades filled with shoes from top to bottom, and they were all the shoes of everyone that was exterminated there. And when you begin to see it, you hear about it, you read about it, but when you actually see the actual the prison camp and the shoes and the film, you begin to feel this horror. And I could only think of, the only thing that comes even close to it is being a slave, and like being chained to in the bottom of a ship, being transported, being like, with having no control over your your destiny.
Yeah.
And it really struck the entire team. That was a one quiet, solemn day.
Mhm. Um, and then you mentioned that towards the end of your career in Poland, which was what was it, 4 seasons that you played in
Uh,
Poland?
I played 4.5 from 79 to 83.
Okay. And so towards the end of that period is the solidarity period in Polish history, and the labor strikes, and then the martial law that is declared. And it seems like that's when things really started to change, and you're waiting in line, not even knowing what you're waiting for necessarily, but you needed to get stuff, whether it was food or uh, gas for a car. There's tanks on the streets. I loved one of the anecdotes you told about walking to practice past these tanks, and the guys start yelling at you, and it turned out to be a pretty positive encounter.
Yeah, yeah. The solidarity movement. I was living in a city of Sosnowiec, which is near Katowice, and Katowice is one of the main coal mining cities, and our club was actually sponsored by them. So we had a very rich club because coal is one of the major exports. But as this union movement came down from the shipyards north, it came to our town, and there were like whispers that there's going to be boycotts soon. And that's what happened. And when martial law was declared, we saw, I should say, I saw a very different part of like communism, because I was just like playing ball and the fans were there, and there was stuff in the stores, and I could buy what I kind of needed. There wasn't, but then everything was gone. All items were gone. The stores were bare, and it was intentional. They wanted to punish the population so that the solidarity leaders would stop the boycotts. But that's not what happened. It was too far gone. So we got the rationing cards. My club gave me mine. My girlfriend, who I was actually with then, Bojena, she got hers, and we would have to, like everyone else, wait on lines for things, or sometimes you could like bribe people to get things, but just the flour, sugar, toilet paper, lard to cook with, chicken, my favorite, of course, any kind of like meats, everything was gone. But what I did was, since I don't smoke or drink, I traded my coupons for the cigarettes and alcohol for meat. And if you could find stores that had meat, I could get more. So I realized then that communism could be very, very harsh. And I realized also then that I was Polish. I was living as a Polish person did. And my neighbors looked at me as a Pole. I spoke Polish. I lived with a Polish girlfriend. We had our own apartment. And I had transformed myself from an American to a Pole.
That's amazing. And to finish the tank story, those guys called you over, they wanted your autograph.
Yeah. So all sports were postponed. All the games were, but they allowed us to practice. But the curfew was at 8, so the universities couldn't meet. So I'm walking to practice, and there's the tanks on the street, usual thing. And this guy, he's yelling out, "Washington, Koshakuvka, Koshakuvka, Washington," and that means basketball player, Washington, me. So he comes running over there and says, autograph, autograph. So I'm speaking Polish with him because he doesn't think I can speak Polish. Then he starts to call over his friends, and I'm signing autographs to the soldiers that are supposed to be keeping us at, under wraps. But it was like every day I was like, go by the Washington, Washington. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. And speaking of the language, you did pick it up over your time there, which is really impressive. But initially, you're thrust into a pro basketball team where you can't speak a language with your own teammates, but you said that basketball is its own language, and that on the court, some of the practice drills were the same that you were used to, or just sort of the improvisation or the jazz of the game, transcended language, and y'all were able to communicate just, through the ball.
Absolutely. I had a translator for home games and both practices. My first half year. My second year, I had another translator for just practice, not games. So I started to learn Polish, of course, because you hear the curse words first. That's always the first thing. When a guy's yelling at another guy, the guy's gonna miss a shot. They just yell at each other constantly. They are so temperamental. They just yell and scream at each other. So you start to learn the language. In my home, I turned my radio on to a talking station, like a news station, 24/7. And I subconsciously started to just hear it constantly, how the rhythm is, certain words you hear constantly. So I started to learn it pretty fast. But basketball itself is universal. I mean, guys know you learn plays. We had one play with different options based on where guys like move. And this was so cool because college, you got 100 plays, play 1, play 2, play 3, play 4. You're like holding up fingers. Here we have one play for zone, for man. Everybody knows what to do. So when you pass it somewhere, that initiates a movement that everybody knows where they should be. It was fascinating to realize that, it wasn't the American coming there to show Poles, this is how you play basketball. It was the opposite. They were telling me, this is how basketball is played. So what I did was incorporate my ball handling and passing skills with their skills to make this work. Now, there were times where I hit guys in the head with the ball that weren't looking, and the coach stopped practice and said, listen, fellas, we got Kenny here because he plays a certain way. We're not asking him to change. We're asking you all to adapt. And that, when he said that, it showed me that he wanted me to maintain my playing style and not to change it. And it worked out great.
Yeah. And one of my other favorite stories in the book, you talked earlier about that you were becoming Polish, and that one time you were at a restaurant and you recognized some people there speaking English. They were Americans, and they were kind of acting like the stereotypical ugly Americans. And how did you handle that? What was happening and how did you handle it?
Yeah, we were at a dinner with my team, and we're sitting there. It's like 14 of us, and the coaching staff. And there's 4 Americans near us that are complaining about they're getting coffee after the meal shouldn't cost any money. It should be like free. And they're complaining to the waitress, who really doesn't speak any English. I noticed that she was uncomfortable. She came back with the coffee. They complained more. And she left, and I went over to those people, and then I said, look, you're not in America now. You're in Poland. You know, just pay for it. Don't be jackasses. You know, you're making the girl feel bad. Just pay for it. You're not in America. And I go back to my table, and my Polish teammates kind of look at me and smile and kind of like nod, like he's one of us now. Yeah.
That's great. And I mean, you were a highly successful player. I mean, winning a lot of games, various titles, winning awards as the best athlete or second best athlete, you know, in the city, winning MVP trophies, so many trophies, like you had to stuff them into your suitcase. And I was thinking, like, this is definitely a pre 9/11 era where you're carrying a sword onto an airplane, you know. But talk about the success you had there and what that meant to you from a basketball standpoint.
Yeah, that was the hardest part of writing the book, writing about the popularity and the so-called success I had there, because my father always told me, don't toot your own horn, let others toot it for you. So when I wrote about that part, the Kentomania part, it was like writing about someone else. But Kentomania was a phrase coined by a journalist that told the translator that my presence in Poland has changed the culture. Like basketball is now one of the most watched sports there. So our first scrimmage, our hall sits about 2,000. They crammed 3,000 like people in, and there were 5,000 more outside. And I didn't realize what was actually going on, because I thought they always got big crowds, you know, like this one. Every city we played in, crowds, I mean, lines were all over the place. They're meeting me and my translator at the hotel nights before. I was doing interview after interview. I was so tired after traveling. And after every game, signing autographs, chants of Washington, Washington. And it became something that, you know, everybody wants to be popular until you are. Okay. And then you kind of, there's a responsibility with it that you don't realize, that you have to sign autographs, you have to make yourself like present to people. Thank God that there were no after game press conferences then, that they were just like, you know, like journalists that spoke to you. Right. But it became very, very difficult at times. Now, no one ever bothered me at home with Babcha. Never. No one ever bothered me in my other town with my girlfriend. I mean, when we were home, that was like, you know, sacred ground. But games were just incredible. After games, I couldn't get to the locker room at times. You'd get just besieged by people, good meaning people, but just besieged. And being 5'8" doesn't help. I couldn't see over the crowd, you know. Okay. So I'm just like drowning in it. But I did win some awards, and I played well, and for that I'm very, very like grateful.
And you said, I thought this was really insightful and poignant, that you were living a double life in a way, where in Poland you're this superhero, superstar that you couldn't even eat in a restaurant. They had to find a private dining room for you to keep the people from bothering you. Then you'd come back to New Rochelle in the off season, and you knew you weren't the greatest basketball player ever to come out of your high school, you know, or that lived in the neighborhood. And so that created like a, just your brain had to go in two different directions. How'd you deal with that?
Yeah, it was very easy for me because I'm a realist. I understand who I am. So when I came home and played in, you know, the pro-ams against the top players here, like the Mark Jacksons and the Kenny, the Smiths, and you know, all of these guards, and the team I played with, I was the court general. That I didn't score a lot of points. I just set things up, and I knew that I wasn't the best player, but the summer was for me to get the speed of the game back, and to practice hard again, and to remain humble and understand you can be really good at just being the the team the floor general, and that's your job here. There, I had to do more, and the fans kind of saw that aspect of it, and I had to score more points in order for our team to win. But it wasn't difficult. I always grew up with the understanding how to get playing time.
Okay. And you were back to your popularity in Poland. There's two stories in the book involving movies, one of which you were in, and the other that's really based on your time there. Tell us about those.
Yeah, the first one, the one I was in, I was called into the club president office, my translator and me, and they're talking and laughing and giggling and laughing and gesturing. And finally, the translator, his name is Wojtek, by the way, he says, "Kenny, do you want to be in a movie?" And I go, "What? What are you talking about?" You know, he said, "Do you want to be in a movie?" I said, "Is it a comedy?" I mean, it's got to be a comedy if I'm in it. So he says, "No, yeah, sure, let's." So we drove to Warsaw on a weekend where we were kind of like free, and I go to a hotel room, and we're talking with the director and anything, and it turns out that they wanted me to dribble, and the scene it's really weird. This gentleman is talking to his girlfriend, and they're watching the Harlem Globetrotters on TV. And she says, "Look how great they are. They're fantastic. Look at these guys play." And then he says, "That's nothing. I used to play with them when I was younger." And he goes out to show her how good he can like handle the ball. And that's where we change parts. And I do the ball handling in my Southampton College like uniform, you know. And that movie turns out is one of the most popular cult comedies in Polish cinema. That scene is an iconic scene. I couldn't believe it. There are people in Poland to this very day who say, "You're Ken Washington? You're the guy who was in the movie Mish," which is actually means teddy bear. The second movie, which I inspired, unbeknown to me, came out in 1988, I think. It's called The Wizard of Harlem, and it's based on my presence there. It's a terrible movie. It's not that funny, but the fact that I inspired it must mean something.
Yeah. And then you go on to play in Sweden, and I don't want to give away the whole book, but you know, what did this period in your 20s, you're a young man now, how old are you now? Late 60s?
When in Sweden, I was 28.
But now today in 2022, I mean, so this is,
Oh, now I'm
yes,
67.
yeah. So this was 40 years ago. It's not your entire life,
Yep.
but it's a really significant part of your life. How did it change the course of your life, or change you as a person, having this unusual, only of its kind experience?
Yeah, Poland specifically impacted me the absolute most. It taught me more about myself than any college could. You learn about who you are, and you learn about who others around you are. So I learned that I had to respect and understand other people's cultures if I was going to actually live and uh, thrive there. Sweden was much easier to transfer to because everybody speaks English. It's like living in America, but you know, it's Sweden.
Mhm.
But Poland was really a learning experience, learning how to assimilate. And I learned a tremendous amount about myself. I learned in the book, I wrote a short chapter on solitude is bliss. And I wrote that to kind of connect my youth with Poland. That my character through practicing basketball allowed me the ability to live and endure Polish culture because I like to practice alone. And by doing that, I found what I call like solitude. And in Poland, I was often alone. You can't speak the language. And you realize how far we actually are. That first night after I got to Poland, drove to my town, practiced, I went up into my hotel room and I realized, wow, I'm in Poland. I mean, I can't go home, I mean, and you kind of go, okay, I'm here, I'm going to do this. But that reality sets in. I don't know the language. I'm a long way from home. It's just basketball. What's going to keep me here? And it's my love and passion which gave me the solitude to survive in Poland.
Wow. Has Poland stayed with you all these years? Like, do you still find an opportunity to speak Polish, or have you gone back over there? Do you eat borscht and kielbasa? Like what part of that experience has remained with you?
Yeah, I haven't been back since, but I'm going back this summer. I know it's going to be a very different experience because when I left Poland, it was communist, and now it's a democracy, and it's going to look different. It's probably going to feel a lot different too. So I kind of am realizing that I'm going to be very moved and um, uh, teary-eyed. You know, what I keep with me, kielbasa, love it. Always buy it around here. Can't get enough of it. Um, Everything else, the Poland has stuck with me from what the lessons I've learned. I truly believe I've become a better person, son, brother, parent, husband, just based on the fact that I lived in a country that probably no one else could have endured. I kind of say it's like the Jackie Robinson, his shadow. That I wasn't the best basketball player, but I was the right one for that time, and that's kind of the way I look at it. I wouldn't change it for anything. I wouldn't want to sit on an NBA bench because that's what I would have done if I would have made the Lakers or any team. If I practiced the amount I practice, I want to play.
Yeah. Well, how do you think about your role in history in terms of, I mean, there's tons of American college players that go play in Europe now. There's so many Europeans playing in the NBA. and you were really right at the front edge of that. Does that mean something when you turn on a game and see the way the game has changed on both sides?
Yeah, yes and no. So, you know, I when after I wrote this book, I was hoping that my friends would read it, the colleagues I will work with read it. And what happened was that academics read it, yourself, Slavic academics, Black history academics, Cold War uh, uh, experts. And what was good for me was realizing that academics like the authenticity and the history. And I always wondered, is this book going to be significant, or is my life, or this moment? And I'm hoping, yes, that being the first American, I just didn't integrate it. I was the first American in a communist country playing ball. And I also practiced with the Olympic basketball team there, which probably makes me the first American ever to practice with a communist Olympic team. So I'm hoping that it's significant in the fact that people look at it. And I realize I'm not Jackie Robinson because he's a national historical figure. This is more an international story. And when I see people, I see WNBA players going into former Soviet bloc countries making a lot of money, and they're supplementing their salaries. I wish I made their money then. I wasn't making anything, so I look at it and say, well, you know what? I know the women are kind of complaining about not getting paid like their male, the counterparts, and having to go there. I wasn't paid like the male, the NBA, and I went there and made way less. So it's this, but I opened that door for you, and or I kind of did. I don't know if I did, but I was first. So now I look at it like, did I open it up for everybody? Probably not. But I was first, and I realized that the European player coming here could have come 40 years ago. Arvidas Sabonis was the greatest player I've ever seen play. Mm-hmm. The entire Russian national team could have come over. Back then, they just couldn't. The Yugoslavs could too. They were unbelievable. I played against Drazen Petrovic when he was like 17. Wow. He was really good, Detlef Schrempf too, So I saw that one day this would happen because these players are so good, they can come over here. I guess I answer your question by saying, yes, I pioneered it, and I hope it's significant to others to read about it, and WNBA players to go, well, I'm making pretty good money.
Well, before we go, here's the book, Kentomania, really fascinating, interesting book. I'm so happy that you got in touch with me and let me know about it. Kent, just before we go, like, how can people find the book if they want to buy it for themselves? And is there anything else coming from this? I think you mentioned that there might be a movie or some interest in telling your story in other ways.
Yes, so it's available on Amazon Books, $15. It's I really want my story out there, and I hope it's interesting. The second part, there is I've been contacted by a film agency in Amsterdam. I don't want to say their name too soon,
Mhm.
who are researching my Polish background there to make a documentary.
Okay.
I'm hoping this will. I mean, I've contacted ESPN and wrote emails and everybody else, but like, who is Kent Washington? I don't have any name recognition here, but I'm hoping that at some point something comes out to give me a little more like national publicity,
All right.
because I'm hoping it's a story that kind of resonates with people.
Yeah, I mean, for people who are really into sports and society and history and race, and it's a new story, and I think it'll be a fascinating story for a lot of people. So, Kent, thank you for joining us, and all the best to you. Take care.
Thank you so much. Thank you.